Hey, this is Kirk Walden, and welcome to Coffee with Kirk on the Pregnancy Help Podcast. And today, I'm joined by my lovely wife, Jenn, once again. Jenn, good to have you.
I'm so glad to be here.
And we're going to talk about something that relates to you. We started with calling last month, and now we want to talk about calling and pouring into the calling of our new people from leaders. How do we as leaders do that? And Jenn, your work kind of relates to this in pregnancy help work. Jump in here and tell us what we're going to talk about today.
Well, I've worked as an educator for more than 25 years, and I do believe there's a lot of comparison there between pregnancy help ministries and the calling of working as an educator. You know, I've worked with over 3,000 teens in my experience as an educator. As we become women of a certain age or men of a certain age, we really do have to start looking at how do we equip up and coming leaders and up and coming individuals who are called to ministry, who are called to education. And so my experiences have kind of been vast. And as we were talking through it, we really realized there are so many comparisons here.
There certainly are. And it's interesting because you've been an educator for 25 years. And yet coming back into the public school system just a few years ago, you kind of experienced one of the things that we're going to talk about today. And I want you to tell that story.
Okay. So I had worked as an educator and really worked hard. And as you work hard, then you kind of, in any career, you kind of climb up the ladder. And I hate to compare education to that as a career, but there is some level of that. And so I ended up working in private school settings, hybrid Christian schools, things of that nature, and eventually became a principal of a small Christian school. Absolutely loved it. I had the chance to mentor other women, to set culture, guidelines. It was such an incredible moment in my career, and I loved it. When we felt called as a family,
there's that word again,
to enter into public education in our community, then that all changed for me very drastically.
Yes, because you had to go back in as a teacher after all this experience. And in a way, you were starting to those you were working with. It was almost like you were starting from the beginning again.
Right. Because no one cared what I had done previously. Everybody on the ground and even those in authority over me, they just wanted me to do my job, and they really didn't care what I might have known or what I might have added to the community. And it was one of the most humbling experiences of my life because I really started back at the absolute bottom.
And that is kind of where we want to jump off here and talk about our work in pregnancy help centers, because there are those of us who have been in this for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we're not starting at the bottom, we absolutely have to look at those who are coming in fresh and new. You got to see it from a kind of different perspective.
Right. But I think for me, I don't know. I didn't feel always very gracious about it, maybe in my heart, but I think in my actions, I kind of followed through pretty strongly. I wanted to be humble. I wanted to remember that, you know, there were much younger people than me who had been recently through college and learned about best strategies and practices, and that I could learn from them. And so it was humbling at times to feel like they're coaching me, they're teaching me. There's a better way to do a particular activity or strategy with my students, but I did learn from them. And I guess that's a point I would make for all of us, you know, is we're never too far along to learn a new way, to have a new strategy. And I think that with this younger generation, you know, can we sort of like suck it up and be willing to learn from them and grow from them? Because if we will, in reality, we're training them. We're training them what it looks like to walk with humility, to lead with humility. We're training them to see what does it look like to learn and grow.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking about it as I've been involved in this ministry for now 35 years. And I've taken 3 or 4 calls this week from people saying, what do you know about this? Can you help me in this area? And every time I've taken that call, I've learned something from the person who
Mm.
called. I've been able to grow, and I'm just amazed. And for those of you who have been in this for a while, like I have, I'm just amazed at what the new people are bringing to the table. They're bringing a fresh perspective that I haven't seen before, and they're bringing ideas, as you talked about, that I haven't thought of before in development, in leadership, and all of these things. And I think, will I be humble enough to allow that to happen? Now, there's a flip side because there are new people coming in who have a lot of great ideas.
Mm-hmm.
They're excited and they want to share them with us. And I think that's wonderful. But at the same time, those of us who have walked this road for a while, we've made a few of the mistakes and we may be able to see, well, this sounds like a great idea, but have we considered?
Mm-hmm.
So there's all these things going on, and you've seen that in education as well, Jen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, it was kind of actually a blessing that I had stepped away from the classroom for quite a while because I really did need to adjust. It's a new world. Let's talk about artificial intelligence and new materials, and you know, there. Even though the mission and the goal is pretty much the same, over the years, the tools we're using have changed some, and so on one hand, what I learned very quickly was I did have things to learn. But what I also found was the more that I was willing to implement new things, try new things, the more that my own experience was a gift to others and a blessing to others. If I'm not willing to grow and learn myself, then I think it's not uncommon then for me to sort of get shut off, or people don't want to even approach me because I know everything.
Yeah. And here's one that you mentioned, artificial intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of those things that was coming about as you came back into the school system, began to just bust loose.
Right.
And here you were, you said this, I did not, a woman of a certain age and men of a certain age, of course. You took on AI as to how it can be used in the classroom effectively without leaning on it so much that you're not teaching anymore, obviously. But you did that, and then you're teaching countywide classes.
Right. Isn't that hilarious? Because I was like first year back in the district, and I'm like, what is this AI? And then I started implementing it mainly out of necessity, like I was drowning at times. And then next thing I know, within a year, I'm teaching district-wide how to utilize it in our classrooms. So that was really fun.
But it's a perfect example of what we deal with in this ministry, because there are new ideas that come in. And there are some who are going to look at this new idea, whatever it happens to be, and say, no, we've never done it that way before. We cannot do this. And there are those ideas that we have to embrace, even though we haven't done it. And those of us who have been around for a while have to jump in instead of rejecting it out of hand. And I'm old enough to know, look, I sent out my newsletter right around 2000. I'd send it by fax. I'd send it by email, and I would send it paper through the regular mail. Well, I had people contacting me and say, please don't send it by email because it'll mess with our medical records. That's how. And I'm like, I don't know how those are connected, but at the same time, there was this fear. And I understand fear because I've been fearful of new ideas. And I think in this ministry, humility tells us we have got to look at new ideas with an open mind. There are some we need to reject because they won't work. But there are others that we need to embrace, even though we're fearful, even though it means a learning curve. And I think about that AI because you would be telling me, hey, I can grade my tests, I can do this. And it was just an amazing concept that you went from, oh my goodness, what is this, to sharing it district wide. So I think humility is vital, and it's vital on both ends. Right. It's vital for those who have walked this road, and it's vital for those coming in with new ideas.
Yes, correct. Because I think there is sort of this generational gap, and it seems to me, maybe it's because I'm older now, but it just seems much more deepened than it has in previous generations. But it just feels like there's just this disconnect generationally. And how do we bridge that? And I think we have to be so careful as the generation of leaders to not reject and push away these younger people, but instead to embrace them. And that's one of the things so I went just back to my education history. So I go back into the district. It was 2 of the hardest years of teaching in my life, very difficult. But I figured it out. I moved forward, and now in my 3rd year teaching, I'm actually helping mentor someone who wants to become a teacher. And so that made us think too about this whole concept of vulnerability. And when we're working with this generation below us, how do we work with them? How do we mentor them? How are we vulnerable with them? And I know in my particular situation with Lily, who's my current student teacher I'm working with, I've really just decided there's nothing I'm going to hide from her. I want her to see it all. I want her to see when I'm struggling. I want her to see when things aren't going well. And then I want to debrief with her. Hey, what do you think I could have done differently there? How could we have approached that in a better way? Mentorship and walking beside one another in calling is one of the best teachers. Reading a book was never, ever going to prepare me for walking into that classroom on the first day. It was on the ground experience, walking beside other teachers, that was the most important.
And you brought up calling, which was our last episode. We talked about calling, and here we are talking about a shared calling. Because if we're going to fulfill the calling, John 4:35, the fields are ripe for harvest, go. We're in that mode right now where we cannot afford not to be united. We have to be united in this calling.
I agree 100%. The laborers are few, and we can't afford to have people sit and get, which is an educational term. We need on the ground training. We need going in this ministry, in this calling that we have. There's an incredible teaching shortage right now. And we're looking at people and saying, hey, we will embed you. We will train you on the go to become an educator. And so we are doing a lot of mentorship and coaching in education right now. And I see, I know that coaching is a big term right now, but I believe in it. I don't believe it's just a trend. I think it's a vital tool we have to equip leaders and equip those that have been called to our ministry. So I can't stress enough. If your ministry cannot function without you, then you need to be mentoring and coaching others. You need to be coming up underneath other people who are called and supporting them and equipping them with the tools they need.
And I'm going to throw an off-the-wall question at you. We hadn't talked about this, but you mentioned sit and get being an education term. We can't afford to do that, because I want you to define sit and get and then contrast it with coaching and mentoring.
I love that. Okay. So currently my student teacher, she has been in college, so there's been a sense in which she's setting and getting. But when she's actually in my classroom, kind of in the practice, I allowed her to just kind of observe me just a couple of days. And then I said, all right, it's your turn. Let's do this. And so I
threw her right in the deep end.
I did. I was like, all right. So I've done different strategies with her. I'm putting her, say, with a group of 4 individuals and saying, okay, I want you to go another layer with these kids. Teach them this concept and go a little bit deeper. Let's work one-on-one with the kids. I wanted her to, as quickly as possible, just have the practices of engaging with students. And so as quickly as possible to get people in ministry engaging with clients in the field, doing the things that are needed within ministry. It just starts creating a confidence, um, a, a, a language that they can or definitions they can put language to. That didn't make sense necessarily, but you know what I'm trying to say. Just the language of our ministries, and it's on the go. It's debriefing. It's reflecting. It's watching others in ministry and calling, following through with that, doing the everyday.
Well, humility, we've got to be able to learn from others. Vulnerability, you talked about sharing mistakes and sharing different things. These two things are part of calling. And I think if we incorporate those together, we're also being able, there is a point where, as you mentioned with your intern, there is a point, student teacher, I guess is the right way to say it, where she had to sit and get in the classroom.
Correct.
We have our policies and procedures. We have our ways of doing things. We walk through and train and these kind of things. But then we've got to be effective in our coaching and mentoring, because look, in this ministry, we are short of people. We don't have enough. I don't know if any of us running a pregnancy help ministry say we've got plenty of people. We don't have a need for any more. We always need more. So there is that sit and get, but then we've got to go ahead and mentor and coach, and doing so with humility and vulnerability. Am I on the right track?
Absolutely. And one thought I had was I do wonder about partnering with Christian schools, Christian universities and bringing in young women and men who are interested in ministry in this capacity, giving them an opportunity to have on the ground experience. But this is a way to expand our reach in this amazing calling that we have to support life.
Yeah. And we stepped into something right there, because we're talking about, what about kids at Christian colleges and universities? What can they do at our center when we're talking about confidentiality, when we're talking about they may be seeing people who are their classmates, if they were actually in the counseling rooms or in the rooms where we advocate all these things. So I know those are things to think about, and we're not saying do this, do that, but we need to be asking that question. How do we bring these new people in? How are we coaching them, and how are we giving them on the ground experience? Because the fields are ripe and the workers are few. And I think we need to lean into this idea that the workers are few and do more to bring in than we may feel comfortable with.
Right.
And I know there are guidelines in there. We need to be careful. I totally get that. But comment on that. Am I off track here, or am I doing well?
As far as?
Well, I'm just thinking about our ministries and how do we walk that fine line?
Yeah, that is something very important. Obviously, we want to have the utmost care in these areas. The truth is, I'd love to know what listeners think. I'd love to know what's happening out there that maybe other ministries could benefit from hearing. I do know that I've been involved with enough ministries around the country and seen enough individuals to know that we do need more help. And I think pulling in this younger generation and in a way letting them loose to help and support is it's hard to do that. It's hard to let loose like that, but I do think overall we benefit.
Yeah, and I think there have to be boundaries. But as we talk about calling, which is where we started last month, and we're talking about bringing in others who have that calling, mentoring them with humility and vulnerability. As we talk about all these things, I think the question should be, what can we do to bring in more?
Yeah.
Because I am the reticent person. I'm like, well, we can't do that. Okay. But what can we do? What can we do to bring in these? Because they do have new ideas. And I guess going back to the beginning of where we started here, those of us who have been around a little bit longer, we need to have the humility to say we still haven't learned it all. We got to keep growing. The vulnerability to share with the younger people who are coming in where we made mistakes and what they can learn from those mistakes. But then those who are younger, who are coming in, need to have the humility too, that I can learn from those.
Well, I think you're bringing up a great point, because as a younger teacher, I sought out mentors and I planted myself in their classrooms. A lot of times I'd take my lunch in and sit in their classroom and learn and observe from them. And I know it's not that simple when we have clients but if you're a younger person, find your mentors, find those older people that you can go to and talk through ideas with, and listen and do observe them in ministry anytime you can. Because that's an incredible blessing that you can have from another generation.
All working together. The calling is too much. The fields are too ripe that anybody isn't either coaching and helping and learning at the same time, or learning from those and being coached so that we can grow into this ministry, because together we can do amazing things.
Yes.
And
what if both generations are vulnerable? And what if both generations are humble? What can we do to the glory of God?
I think the limits are beyond our imagination. So I think there are no limits. So thanks, Jenn, for joining me today. I like doing this with you as we talk about calling. And if you want to get in touch with us and say, hey, this is what we're doing and we want to share it with others, please do that. My email is kirk@kirkwalden.com, and you can see it in the show notes. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us. Looking forward to our next podcast together.